Hello and welcome to the ScrapbookPal YouTube channel. This is Colleen Beamish from Humor Bean Cards, and today I'm making a Christmas card featuring the Country Christmas collection from Spellbinders. So I have 3 products here from the collection, starting with the Country Christmas embossing folder. This is a 3D embossing folder that puts a lot of texture onto your card, and it shows all of this Christmas imagery, including wreaths, Christmas trees, ornaments, and more. Then I have the Country Christmas banner and sentiments, which is press plates with coordinating dies, so you can cut out a little banner for your sentiment. And then I have the Country Snowman set, which is the focal point of our card today. That is just a die set that cuts out an adorable snowman with his cowboy hat and bandana, a little bunny, a bird feeder, and a broom. So I went ahead and die cut out all of our pieces here, and you can pause the frame if you want to see all of the different pieces and the colors I used for them. But we'll go ahead and start assembling our snowman. So I am using some Bearly Arts liquid glue today, and what I love about these dies is that as you cut them out, they put a little impression in the paper showing where everything should be connected. So this is the body of the snowman, and it has a little line that shows you right where the head should go, and then you can line up the bandana with that. So as I was saying, I am using some Bearly Arts liquid glue today. I love that glue, partly because it's very secure. Once you stick it down and it dries, it stays in place. But also it has a very fine tip nozzle, so on all of these tiny pieces, like this little piece of the bandana, you can just put a little bit of glue right where you need it and know that it will still stay secure once it dries. So you might notice that I'm not doing any ink blending on my die cut pieces today. That is a technique that I frequently do to add dimension to all of the pieces so they don't look just flat. And that's definitely something you could do. When I was making this card, I just wasn't feeling it, and I didn't feel like that much detail needed to be added. But if that's something you want to do, you can definitely use a small blending brush and some ink, the same color as the cardstock, and add as much dimension as you want with ink blending. Now I'm gluing on the teeny tiny eyes onto the snowman, and the tweezers were just not cutting it. So I grabbed out my Pinkfresh, I'm not exactly sure the name of the tool, but it's like a jewel picker with the waxed end. And that just lets you kind of pick up the paper and put it right over the spot of glue. I found that's a lot easier with these smaller pieces, and it's something that I often forget is an option to do. So if you have one of those jewel pickers, I definitely recommend using that. Or if you don't have one of those, all of the products I use in today's video are available at ScrapbookPal.com, and they're linked down in the description below, so be sure to check that out. Now, when I was putting the buttons down on the front of my snowman here, there actually aren't lines to show you where to put them. I think that's because there's some flexibility with wherever you want to put them. I made sure they weren't in exactly a straight line because the snowman is a little bent in the middle there, so I put them slightly out of line so they don't look perfect. And then I just added my little gold star to the bandana. Another idea I love is cutting the bandana out of some pattern paper if you didn't want it just to be one solid color. And also, if you're struggling with how to put this snowman together, what I like is that the image of the completed snowman is on the packaging for the die set, so you can follow along there and kind of scope out how things should be put together. Now I'm putting together my hat. That is comprised of 4 different pieces. So I have the dark brown base of the hat, and then I have a lighter brown that is the top of the hat, the band of the hat, which I did in some red cardstock, and it's just a little sliver of paper basically, and then the final shadow, which goes on the outer edge, and I just did the shadow in a black cardstock, but you could definitely do that in a deeper brown. But I think with layering dies like these, a lot of contrast is actually better than less contrast, even though sometimes it feels like it's going to look a little weird. So I went ahead and glued that on top of my snowman, and that is my snowman complete. So I think this guy is so cute. You could obviously do it without any of the components. So if you wanted to leave off the bandana or leave off the hat, it could just be a plain snowman. Now I'm assembling my little bunny, and it has this funky gray piece. I'm sorry that the camera's out of focus here, but as a funky gray piece, it's kind of an odd shape, but it puts the arm and the ear on and just attaches on the back of the bunny. So you can kind of see there how it lines up. And then I'm adding the little tail, which is a tiny piece. So I put a little dot of glue on it and laid the bunny on top. Again, I'm very sorry that the camera's out of focus. I just got a new lighting setup and I'm still adjusting to what that means for my filming. Now I just add a little, the inner ear piece, which is in a pale pink cardstock, and then this teeny tiny triangle, which you can barely even see here, fills in the nose. So it just goes on the back of the bunny and you can see just barely the tip of the nose. And here's a close-up of that bunny. So that's pretty cute. And I just did it in white. You could obviously do a brown bunny or whatever, a gray bunny if that is what you want to do. Now I have my tiny cardinal, and that is just 2 layers of cardstock. So I have an orange piece that's the background and then a red piece that goes right on top, and the orange just peeks through for the beak. Now I have a bird feeder. I don't end up using the bird feeder on the card, but I did want to show you how it is assembled. So I die cut that the base out of white cardstock and then the top and bottom of the bird feeder out of red cardstock. I'm putting together the little sign, which I have the front of it, which says welcome. That is die cut out when you die cut it. And then there's also the background piece that doesn't have the words, so that you have kind of a layered piece with a little bit more dimension. Now I'm gluing these onto the post that I cut out of that craft cardstock, and then I'll just glue the sign right on the front of it. Now, the center of the bird feeder that's currently just white, you could definitely color in with some Copic markers if you wanted to look like it has seeds in it. But those are all my components complete, so I'm going to start working on the background. So I have my Country Christmas embossing folder, and I just have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card front that I'm running through my die cutting machine in the embossing folder. And here you can see that gorgeous texture and design. It is so raised, it's very hard to see, like really capture on the camera. But I ran that through, and then I went ahead and die cut out another piece of blue cardstock in this oval shape. And I'm going to run that through also. But I'm showing you here in the embossing folder, one side of the folder is the like raised end and one side is the indented end. So I'm going to be working on the indented end. So the more flat side, if that makes sense. Like the background is pretty flat. And I'm taking some VersaMark ink and putting this all over the inside of that embossing folder. Now this is quite strange because it's not what you would typically do, but I'm going to be using Perfect Pearl's pigment powder. That's a lot of P's. And I want the powder to stick to this ink. So you could even do this with a color ink if you wanted the background of the embossing to be a color. I've done that in some other videos, but today I'm just doing the embossing ink because it's going to be nice and sticky when we run it through the die cutting machine. So I put the oval somewhat in the center. It didn't have to be perfect. And then I ran that through my machine. Now when I take it out, you see it has that same texture and it has a little bit of a sheen to it in the background, and that's because of that VersaMark ink. Now I'm taking my pigment powder. I've never used this before. This is my very first time using it, so it was kind of an experiment for me too. And I'm just taking a dry paintbrush that's kind of fluffy, and I'm going to dip it into my powder. I tapped off any excess because I wasn't really sure how much I would need or how it would apply. So I didn't want to put on too much at once. And then I'm just taking that right to my cardstock here, and I'm just brushing it all over. Now the hope is that the pigment powder will stick to the background and not really stick to the raised areas where hopefully there's not too much VersaMark ink, so it won't be quite as sticky. Now once I go all over the entire background and I'm happy with it, I'm going to take my I always forget what these are called. It's a microfiber cloth here. And I'm just going to kind of buff off any excess powder, mostly focusing just on those raised areas. I'm not applying a lot of pressure because I don't want to accidentally brush off excess powder in the like lower valleys of the embossed paper. So I'm really happy with how that turned out. Here you can see kind of the sheen of the back, that sparkly background, as well as kind of the contrast between the raised areas and the valleys. I put some foam tape on the back of this, and I will just adhere it right onto that card front that we already cut out and embossed. I lined it up. I kind of lined up the design. It's not perfect because I wasn't really sure what my intention was, but it doesn't need to be perfect. No one's really paying that close of attention. Now I'm going to start adhering all of my little snowman and friends onto the card front. I'm using foam tape on every single piece. I didn't show the process of putting that on and tearing off the release paper because you kind of get the gist of that. But every piece is popped up, so there's plenty of dimension on this card. Now I'm going to work on my sentiment, so I get out my BetterPress system. This is such a fun system. I don't use it very often, so I kind of had to remind myself of how to use it. But I'm putting the sentiment Season's Greetings right in the center of the BetterPress, and then I'm taking my cardstock piece, which I already die cut out using the dies in the set, and I put some temporary adhesive on the back of that die. So right now I have the sentiment facing upwards, the paper that I want it on facing downwards, and I'm putting the plastic right on top, pushing it down so that the cardstock adheres to the plastic, and then I'm going to put ink onto my letterpress plate. So I'm just using some brown ink here, and I'm doing it just like you would ink up a stamp, except I'm also kind of rubbing it around so that it's kind of slick. Like, you can't really do that on a stamp. And I am brushing off any excess ink, although that won't really get onto anything I don't want it on anyway. And now I'm putting the magnetic plastic right on top, and I'm not pressing it down then. I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine. Now, I'll admit it didn't come out perfect. It didn't get as much of an impression as I would have liked, so I would have needed to use more pressure when I ran it through my die cutting machine. But it wasn't something I was very worried about. I was happy with the result. So I'm just trimming off one end of our little banner here because I needed, where I'm going to kind of nestle it in behind the snowman, I needed some more space. And then I'm just using some liquid glue to adhere this one down so it's not popped up, and I needed to use liquid glue because of all that texture on the background. So I'll just nestle it in behind my snowman and hold that down until the glue dries. I did end up putting some foam tape on the right side edge just so that that end of the sentiment wasn't hanging out without anything to attach it to. Now I'm adding this card front onto my card base, which is heavyweight white cardstock, cut down to A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 folded. And then I'm putting liquid glue all over the back of this card front. And again, I'm using liquid glue just because of all that texture. Now, when I line this up, there is a little bit of excess cardstock at the bottom. So I just take my scissors. I'm using some Spellbinders Pro Shears, which are absolutely fantastic for cutting through these 2 layers of very heavyweight cardstock. So I'll just go right along the edge of the blue cardstock, and you can always use a paper trimmer for this if you don't have some heavy-duty scissors like this. So that completes my card today. I think this is such a sweet Christmas card. I love the contrast of the sparkly, shiny background behind the snowman, as well as the more plain blue background behind. Oh, I did go in with some white gel pen just to add little details. I think the highlights make such a difference on the card. Sometimes I go a little crazy with it. One tip I learned somewhere along the way is that you want to be adding the highlights to all of the darkest areas. So like on the cowboy hat, I'm adding it to the dark brown and then the black section, and then on the left side of the hat. No one's really paying as close of attention as you think they are. So just kind of have fun with it. And probably a tip I do need to learn is to not go overboard. Stop while you're ahead. So I do add some white to the bandana and then also to the stones on the snowman's stomach and eyes. So that will complete my card for today. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Again, all of the products I used in today's video are listed down in the comments below, so be sure to check that out. And feel free to subscribe to the ScrapbookPal channel. There's always new crafty inspiration here. And I hope I will see you again very soon. Bye!